aviator.
What were you flying?
B-24s.
Oh, you doing the
Four engine.
I flew one of the fast ones. Well, P-51.
Oh yeah, that was a fighter plane, and a good one.
And go like hell.
It replaced the Spitfire.
That's right.
And what was the other fighter aircraft which had the big?
47, the P-47.
Yeah, P-47.
Yeah.
That was a different company.
Well, I went in a program called the Tuskegee
So
Airmen.
I have the second round of
wow.
questions, you have the first. You just.
They're sort of in my head.
And that was a very
Well, you
famous
sort out, you're-
Yeah,
step towards integration.
Whatever you
that's right.
want.
They
Okay.
didn't want us in there.
Yeah,
But
well,
I'm just listening, picking up material.
but it was the
Roll?
first
Yeah.
big,
start?
first
You don't have
noticeable
to start, let
step.
them talk.
Okay,
And when you see
Then
a break-
everything moved.
okay.
Yeah.
So today we're almost there.
Well, you got a little way to go, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
When I was in 3.5 years, and when I got out, then I went to Syracuse University and studied applied science.
Right.
And I was their radar expert. And,
Oh, their radar?
I worked in them big balloons,
Yeah.
and I got tired of fighting, so I quit
Oh,
and went across the street to Cornell University.
oh boy.
Went to work, I worked in the physics department with those guys.
That was one of the land grant colleges.
That's right. They had all.
Cornell.
Okay, I'm
these
just
guys
rolling.
had built
Yeah, I can do that later.
You
the
can't.
ones I'm working on.
And you know the statute that set up the land grant colleges, the U.S. statute was a page and a half long.
A page and a half long?
Yeah, something like that. I've heard that. and when you think of all the great land grant universities
In one
all
page
coming
and a
back,
half.
and now we have the Internal Revenue Service had 68,000 pages of regulation.
Now, where did you grow up?
I grew up, it's my very early youth in Oklahoma, Tulsa, because my father was in a partnership with NVV in the early days of the oil strikes in northeastern Oklahoma. This was before the big Texas oil came in.
Okay.
So I'm talking about 1915, 16. And my dad went out to Oklahoma in a partnership with his dad, NVV, and was one of the early guys in the Oklahoma oil.
Yeah,
And Tulsa, where I was born in 1922.
my dad used to tell me about the streets were mud
Yeah.
in Tulsa.
Well, when my mother and father were married in 1914 in Philadelphia, she was from an old Philadelphia family, the Lippincotts. He had bought a Stutz Bearcat, which was the hot two-seater automobile at the time, and so he proceeded after they were married in Philadelphia to drive his new bride and him and their luggage in the Stutz Bearcat to Oklahoma. There were no paved roads. There was, or very few. And they fought their way into as far as Massillon, Ohio, and gave up. It was April, and the mud was too much. And so he had a great friend from Yale days, a guy named Horatio Wales, if you can believe it. And the Wales family were prominent locally,
Okay.
so they had some place to stay for a few days. They put the Stutz Bearcat on a flat car and shipped it by rail on to Tulsa. And then they rode the train into Tulsa. And when they got to Tulsa, it was muddy, no paved, Main Street mud. So they were walking on duck boards.
Yeah.
We call them duck boards.
My dad used to tell me about that. He was there with his grandfather,
Yeah.
and it was all
In the mud in Tulsa.
And he was telling me about the number of Indian chiefs that got killed to get their property, their oil leases.
Now, when you were growing up in...
But finish the story, Dad.
Yeah, so my mother and father got off the train, and with all their luggage, and they had help and so forth, walking on duck boards up the main street of Tulsa, which was muddy. And there was only one big building that was the Mayo Hotel, where they had to spend the night. So he went in and checked into the hotel, and he said, I noticed there was a big crowd of people out in the street there down not too far away. What happened? They said, oh, a horse fell and drowned in the mud in the main street of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that crowd was gathered around the dead horse.
In the mud.
What to do with it.
Drowned in the mud.
Yeah, so I thought it was kind of, that's 1914.
Now, when you grew up in Tulsa, did you work in the oil fields, or how did you
No,
start?
my father died at the age of 48 in 1928. We always thought he died very young, and in a way he did. But the average life expectancy of my dad, born in 1880, was 46 years. So he actually lived the
Beyond.
normal expectancy.
Yeah.
But after he died, after a couple of years, she married a mutual friend of theirs, an Englishman, Captain Harold Money. And then in 1930, she decided to move the family back east.
Got it.
But my dad's dying wish was, Connie, for God's sakes, don't let the children be brought up in Philadelphia. So,
Well, Dougie and all the godly kids used to come to Moore to spend the summer.
yeah, up to
And
Morris.
that's where I meant, you know.
Yeah,
Now, Daddy, talk a little bit about where you were born and where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in a place called Olean, New York.
that was my granddad was the first mayor.
That's right. And Olean was named after an old Indian lady named Oily Ann.
Oh, really? I never knew that.
And they had oil fields all around there.
It's the Olean Bradford area.
That's right, Olean
Yeah.
Bradford. And
That's where water flooding came in too.
yeah, that's right.
And NVV was one of the early people in water flooding.
Well, he had a big field down behind our house, which is now called Frensaw Field.
Yeah,
And it's a playground.
they used to keep cows down there.
And I was telling somebody, there used to be a barn there, and my dad would go and milk the cow.
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
So when you were growing up, what are some of the things that you did in Olean?
everything.
Like what?
I didn't have time to get in trouble. My father had me doing, like he said, making bows and arrows.
Yeah.
He saw him doing it. And he used to make kites.
Oh, yeah,
Box
that's
kites,
right
yeah.
there.
And those kind of things that we had to play with, and so we didn't get in any trouble. A cop never had to. The only time a cop car was in front of my house was when the chief of police came to pick up my dad to go fishing.
What was the name of the creek there? Allegheny River?
Yeah,
Allegheny.
Allegheny River.
Allegheny River,
Yeah,
and it was called. And the field now is called Frensaw Field.
yeah.
Now, I had a piece of land that stuck into the park, which I gave the city
Oh,
because it filled out the city's playground, and I didn't need it. But what the hell gets the sense of me hanging on to it? But I was telling Doug, he knew of the place up in the Adirondacks called Paul Smith's.
yeah. That's where my family camp was.
Yeah. And what used to happen was, my dad, Mr. Franshaw, would go and pick up whiskey during the Prohibition and bring it up to Paul Smith and then take it to Morris or wherever they're going to go.
Yeah.
And I was telling them about the car broke down with my dad and Mr. Franshaw, full of booze, full of whiskey. So my dad stood with the car. Mr. Franshaw walked into Watertown, bought a new car, drove it back there, put the plates on it. They loaded up the whiskey in the junker, left it there by the road with the key.
Oh,
Did they ever go back for the car?
No.
I guess it wasn't a priority.
Hell,
but a new car probably cost about
There
$700.
you
Yeah.
go.
but but Dad said he was in this place in Waterstown, in a car dealership, bought the car right there in the window.
Now tell me what you remember about Mr. Franshaw's grandfather, FVV Franshaw.
A lovely guy. He smoked them damn Royalist cigars. And they smelled, oh God, I couldn't stand them. But when my dad would go in the house in the morning, first thing he did, he went by the office, picked up his 3 cigars for the day, and put them in his pocket.
Yeah.
Now, Christmas time, Mr. Franshaw used to give my dad a box of cigars. And the house in Olean
Yeah.
is right there in the middle of town. And it's right next to the high school. But we had a lot of fun because in the summer at Morris, they had riding horses,
Oh,
we
yeah.
had tennis court, we had all these things. Now, I hate horses, so I didn't pay any attention
Didn't mess
to
with
the damn
horses.
horses. But everybody else did.
Now, when did you start going up to Morris? Were you there only in the
Well, we
summertime?
went
or-
back every summer.
Yeah,
Okay.
My granddad, NVV, he had a real purpose to get the cousins all together to know each
yeah,
other.
yeah,
And he would, one way or another, around the 4th of July,
yeah.
get all the cousins living there, come and be with each other at Morris. So it was a very nice thing to do. And he made, if he had to help them financially getting there or whatever, he took care of that. So I would say probably almost all of the summers up to World War II, I visited Morris.
What did you like best about Morris? When you were a
The association with the young cousins, the Fred and Mac Godley, and my older brother Nick, and myself, and the Hickok boys were a bit older, Doug and Bill.
And they were all cousins of yours.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there's 17 first cousins. I'm the last. I'm the last of the Mohegans.
They'd all be right there.
Uh-huh.
And we had picnics and cookouts and all kind of things.
Yeah.
Mrs. Gebhardt, remember her?
Yeah, Miss Gebhardt. Yeah.
The housekeeper. She lived right there. She was a nurse, and she lived with.
She was NVV's nurse.
Yeah, and
My grandmother died of a condition in the spine. Trying to think of it, but she was a very saint-like woman. She really. Granddad was a sort of a wealthy guy, and she would take the grocery money from every week, and then she would take some of it and sneak it out and give it to people who were needy.
yeah,
Did she really?
And he was very sharp. He knew that she was doing
she
it,
was
but he
dipping in the
condoned it.
till.
But she was.
yeah.
I've forgotten the condition of her spine, which ultimately resulted in her death. And I knew her only as a young child.
Okay.
Well, I remember NVV coming up to the garage. He had a 12-cylinder Packard,
Packard, yeah.
a beautiful car.
Touring car.
Yes, I got 8 miles to a gallon. And he came up to the garage and he was talking to my dad, and he said to me, my older sister Anna was just graduated, and Mr. Franshaw said, well, what's she going to do, Henry? And he said, well, she wants to go to nursing school.
Oh,
And he said, how much does it cost? And my dad said, $800. Wrote him out a check for $800 right there on the
yeah.
Where did she go to nursing school?
Harlem,
Harlem in New York? Okay.
in New York City. But we, for he and I, we lived a little different than a lot of kids. A lot of them, I knew kids that didn't have
Anything to eat.
nothing to eat. You go to their house, they're sitting on an orange crate.
Yeah.
And but that was during the Depression years, and when he and I were coming along, and but we had a lot of fun in the summer and the picnics and
Yeah, the people adjusted to the Depression.
yeah,
The joke going around was if we had some ham, we could have some ham and eggs if we had the eggs. That was the sort of it. When I was 4 and 5,
Sure. What else do you remember about the Depression, other than people, not having food and
Well,
furniture and things in their house?
I
What other
was a-
things stand out to
I
you?
was kind of an entrepreneur. I always trying to make some money, and I did. The Allegheny River flew through Olean. In the spring of the year, they get a flow of carp coming up the river to spawn. I figure if I can get some of these fish, I can sell them. So in my neighborhood, there are people from Poland, some of them couldn't speak English, and a damn thing. I get out the river with a dough ball out there and catch a couple. I had a red wagon, and I would come down Green Street, and there was a lady next door, couldn't speak English, but she could say one thing. Bud got the fish. Bud has got the fish. Bud got the fish. And I can hear her today hollering, Bud got the fish. And these little old ladies from all over York would come running to buy the carp.
yeah.
50 cents would buy a 10 or 20 pound fish. And this is during the time when people didn't have any money.
Yeah.
Here I am, a kid, 12 or 13. I had more money than a lot of them because I was up there selling the damn fish. So they had a flood in 1941. The Allegheny River come up out of the bank. And it got 13 inches in our house. But after the flood was over, the Red Cross or somebody said, we will replace all the washing machines if you put them by the curb. So I'm thinking, they got motors in them. So I went and got a crescent wrench, and went up and down the street,
You got all.
taking these motors, take them in my backyard, hose them down, get the mud out of them, and sold them for $3 a piece. I had people coming, is Bud McPeak live here? Yeah, he's got a motor. I say I was entrepreneuring
During the Depression.
when people didn't have it.
Now,
Right.
when you were during the Depression, were you in Oklahoma at the time, or had you
Yeah.
moved back east?
And in Oklahoma, we were an affluent family because of the background. My mother was the heiress of a publishing company, J.B. Livercut, and my father was in partnership with NBV. So we didn't ever suffer loss, but oil in Oklahoma was selling for 10 cents a barrel. You couldn't give it away. And fresh water, drinking water, was selling for 25 cents a barrel. And that I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And you would get a suit of clothes dry cleaned for 50 cents or something like that. And if you went to get a haircut, it would be 60 cents or something of that sort. So it was kind of a different world.
When did you
Yes,
learn how to drive?
What?
When did you learn how to drive?
I got my driver's license illegally at the age of 15 in Baltimore, Maryland. I lied. That's the only time I ever lied where I admitted to myself I lied. Because my birthday was on the 27th of March and I would be 16 and able legally to get a driver's permit and so on. And so I fudged and put my birthday from 27th, I put it back to the 17th so I could get the learner's permit.
You're forgiven.
And I was driving, the chauffeurs we had would teach me how to drive. And
sure.
I was driving when I was 15 or 16.
15.
Like my dad.
When
Yeah.
did you learn how to drive, Daddy?
I was 13. Now, the reason I learned how to drive was at Morris, where we all used to go in the summer, they had some knock-down, drag-out parties.
Oh, boy.
Now, a party lasted 4 or 5 days. It didn't last long enough. So you got to have some place to park the cars of the people that come to the party.
Yeah.
So my dad taught me how to drive in a 34 Ford station wagon with wooden sides. And
Yeah.
Mrs. Godley owned it.
Yeah.
And I learned how to drive.
So you would shovel the cars around.
That's right. And when they pull into the traffic circle, I go and get them and bring them up by the garage. Now, when they leave, they all got to have a tank full of gas, according to Mr. Franchel.
Hold on. So if you came for a party, when you left with the tank of gas.
That's right.
Okay.
But the party was 2 or 3 days. Yeah.
So,
That's why they came to the party.
I would help my father drive these cars downtown to Morris to get them filled up
Wow.
and bring them back. Now, the sheriff, Lee Colburn, had a son who was the same age as me, and we played together. Now, the sheriff would be standing on the corner in Morris, and I drive by
He would.
and waved to him, and he waved back, and nobody ever said a damn word.
So what were those?
The
4-day
4th of
parties?
July was always the high point
What did
of
he-
the summer.
what
Say
did-
again?
what did Ann say?
I said, what were those 4-day parties?
That's a
like?
great question.
Oh,
Describe
gee.
the parties.
What?
The parties, the big parties
Yeah.
you had in Morris. What were they like?
Well, the adults were having all kinds of booze.
Oh, yeah.
Prohibition was repealed by the people long before Franklin Roosevelt repealed it. So all the good people in society, no matter where you were in the hierarchy, everybody was drinking booze
Yeah.
and ignoring prohibition. And the camp, the summer camp we had up in the Adirondacks, was right on the trail of the bootleggers.
Yeah.
And our caretaker, Frank Macy, was a little French-Canadian guy, was the brother of one of the prominent bootleggers, Eddie Macy. And so we always had first-rate booze at the camp.
Yeah.
And every night we'd have cocktails. And when I was 5 years old, I remember being told by my mother, take this tray of martinis to the gentleman. So at the age of 5, I became cynical about some of the laws. But the prohibition was ignored by many of the good people in society.
They had all the booze they wanted.
Yeah.
Oh man, Franchel and my father used to go up to pick it up where the guy brought it in from Canada across the river, and then they'd take it to this place up in the mountains.
Oh, and then you'd go get it from there.
Yeah, and then they'd take it from there to Morris or Olean, wherever they needed it. But he had a cellar full of cases of, and he liked Bacardi rum.
No kidding.
And he and the governor of Ohio,
George White.
Yeah, George White.
He was a partner and friend of my granddad's.
You know, his memory is very good.
He had a rather attractive daughter.
Yes,
She was about 10 or 15 years older than I was.
and then
But she was the first female that I ever sort of ogled.
yeah,
She was good
And
looking.
she was 10 or 15 years older.
Yeah.
yeah,
Good for you.
Oh, she never led me on at all.
Oh, okay.
But as a little kid of,
but he had a chauffeur. His name was Wilson. Every other word was a bad word.
Oh, the governor of Ohio had a
Yeah,
chauffeur. Okay.
and he'd drive from Ohio with Wilson to Morris to party with the old man Franchel. And they would sit up and play cards and drink rum for days on end.
yeah.
Now, Mr. Francho, when you went to high school, where did you go to high school?
I went to a private country day school in Baltimore because my mother, when my father died in 28, she remarried a mutual friend of theirs, Captain Harold Money. He was a very legendary figure. And after a year or so, she decided to move back east, take the family. But since my dad didn't want us taken back to Philadelphia, she went to Baltimore.
Got it. Okay.
And we bought a very nice property out on Riderwood Lane. And there's Riderwood here, but this was Riderwood Lane, which ran north and south out of Baltimore and intersected the Green Spring Valley Road right where our property was.
Okay.
And so we lived very nicely in an old framed manor house. And I went to country day school at Gilman School in Roland Park. And I spent about 5 or 6 years, my younger grammar school years. And then with the family tradition, I went to boarding school in New England. First for a year at Fay School in Southborough, Massachusetts. And then on to St. Paul's School in Concord, New Hampshire. And I spent 5 years there.
Where the godly kids went to school.
Okay. Did they go to school in the same place?
No, they went, the Godleys went to, there's another good boarding school. It'll come to me, but
That's okay.
yeah. No, they went to a different boarding school,
Yeah.
but the people in our group tended to go to private boarding schools if you
Sure.
could afford it.
What did you think of boarding school? Did you like it?
Well, I took to it very well.
Okay.
I had a very good experience at St. Paul's School, and it was a marvelous education.
Well,
It
that's,
still is. It's a very, it's one of the top private, they're now integrated boys and girls. But in my day, it was all boys.
now his cousin was a movie star.
French Otone, yeah. He was my father's first cousin and my second
Yeah.
cousin.
Okay.
It was a different
He married
generation.
What was his name? Her name?
Joan Crawford.
He married every slow-footed woman in Hollywood.
him too.
When he got to his third wife, we stopped annotating the family Bible.
But Joan Crawford.
He married Joan Crawford.
Joan Crawford.
What did you say, Ann?
Joan Crawford took him back in at the end.
And she was
Yeah.
a very smart, able. Joan Crawford was quite an outstanding woman.
Yeah.
But the family word was that she started life as a young girl in Hollywood, in effect being a prostitute. But she had all this brightness, and she went from there on up.
She worked her way up.
She worked her way up, and she married the guy who was head of the PepsiCo company, and she was for many years after she retired from the film business. She was a very active and productive member of the board of directors of that company,
Okay.
Now
and a very fine woman.
you'd be surprised the friends of Mr. Franshaw that used to show up at Moore.
Like who, for example?
Now,
Like George White.
yeah, and what's her name from North Carolina?
Duke?
Duke, Doris Duke.
No, I never met her.
Yeah, I drove her car one time. She had a fancy convertible, but they would come and stay like for a week and party for a week solid.
So tell us about your high school, where you went to high school, Daddy.
Well,
Or going to school in Olean and Morris, right?
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, it was a normal high school. I did exceptionally well as a student, fortunately, and this is how I ended up in the Air Force.
Well, when did you go to school in Morris?
When the fall of the year,
Okay.
you see, we would come out there in June and stay until October or November, and I would go to school in Morris, and so I would head school in both places,
Okay.
and.
Well, how did you end up in World War II from high school?
When the war started, it was a Sunday,
Sunday,
and my mother said to
December
me,
7th.
that's right. my mother had said to me, I want to go and pick some ground pine to make some wreaths out of. She made her own wreath. I had just got my driver's license. So she said, will you take me? We had a little hunting camp to get some of these things. And I said, yeah, I drove her up. And coming back, I turned on the radio. Now, my father never allowed anybody to turn on a radio in a car. And I turned on the radio and they said, the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor. I said to my mother, well, where the hell is Pearl Harbor? And she knew in Hawaii. That was Sunday. On Monday, all the kids in the high school were in the assembly, and the president was delivering his opening address about the dastardly deed and all this kind of stuff.
A day that'll live in infamy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, that was around 11 o'clock in the morning. I go down to the pool room about 4 o'clock, and the recruiting office is down the street, and my friends are all lined up, signing up to go in the Navy.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't believe it.
Same day.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I went up to my father, and my father said, get it out of your head, you ain't going no place till you finish high school. And I didn't. But it was lonesome
Yeah.
because everybody was gone in the service. You go to the pool room, you couldn't get an 8-ball game going.
But you finished your education.
How about you, Mr. Franchise?
Well,
How did you end up
on
in World War II?
Sunday, December 7th, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, I was a freshman at Yale University, new student. And I was sitting in a motion picture theater in New Haven to see some picture. And all of a sudden the lights went up and the manager of the theater walked down and got up on the stage and he said, ladies and gentlemen, the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor. We're at war. And it was a real
Yeah,
shocking kind of thing.
that's right.
But the next day, Monday, I went down with a whole lot of my freshman friends and we enlisted in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
They had a Marine Corps recruiting office
Did
on
you tell
Chapel
your, Did you
Street.
tell your mother what you were doing?
No, she was invalid and I was pretty much independent.
Okay.
But I enlisted in the Marine Corps December 8th.
Yeah.
And my roommate, Tommy Noyes, who was a schoolmate of mine, and I both were interested in private flying, learning to get our private licenses. And we were very interested in aviation. And we just assumed that enlisting in the Marines, we would have at least a chance to get into aviation. But when we went down and tried to follow that up, the word was, no, you're going to be grunts.
Yeah.
In other words, you're in the Marine Corps, you're going to be an infantry.
Laying in the mud.
So Tommy Noyes, my roommate, mother, was the widow of Newbold Noyes, who had founded the Associated Press and was a very prominent, she was a very prominent Washington matron and ran salons and so forth. So Tom and I were very crestfallen when we learned we couldn't get into aviation. So Tom said, I'm going to call my mother. And I said, well, what in the hell are you talking about? Well, she knows a lot about what goes on in Washington. So he called his mother. And she said, oh, the commandant of the Marine Corps was an old beau of mine. I'll call him up for lunch next week. About 10 days later, we were sitting in our little room at Yale, and bang, bang, bang on the door. Open the door, and there's a Marine officer in full uniform. You Francho and Noyes? Yes, sir. Be in my office on Chapel Street at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Bang, close the door. We were transferred from the Marine Corps into the Naval Air Training. The Naval Aeronautical Training Program. And we both went to and got commissioned and got our wings. But it took forever to go through the naval training.
Well, you flew B-24.
B-24s, yeah.
That's too damn slow.
What?
They're too slow.
Yeah, well, the Navy used to speak about the amphibian, the standard naval amphibian is
Yeah.
fly at 90, climate 90, fly at 90, live to 90. That was a very
Yeah.
desirable. If you were an aviator, you were.
Yeah, you were okay.
Yeah, but I got put into a multi-engine and became a co-pilot, young co-pilot on a B-24 in a B-24 squadron, and we were all of our training resulted in our squadron being organized to go overseas on our way out to support the invasion of Japan. And we were stationed at Camp Kearney, north of San Diego.
San Diego.
And typical of the Navy, our squadron was organized to fly halfway to Hawaii, do 180 and come back, just to make sure we could do it.
Wow.
So, you know, all the wags were saying, what the hell, if we can fly halfway, why not go all the way? So just then was when they dropped the 2 bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the war came to a dead halt and was disassembled in a matter of,
So you never had to go any further than halfway to Hawaii, right?
yeah.
Well, that's
right.
good.
Yeah. But, so I never had any serious action.
Now that's good.
Yeah, right.
Well, what I say, after I got out of Syracuse, I went to work for General Electric.
Aha.
And I got tired of fighting after 10 years, so I told him to go to hell, and I quit. But I had so many other job offers that I picked what I wanted. And I took Cornell University because they had a tuition program that covered her
Yeah.
and her sister. They could get 7 years of Ivy League education for damn near nothing. So I turned down some high-paying job to stay with the university.
Yeah.
And this is how. Now she's the vice president of a company that's got how many? 50,000.
Thereabouts.
50,000.
What does your company do?
Healthcare company.
What?
Healthcare company.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. All over the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, she travels all over. Leaves Daddy home.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question, Daddy. What, when you were in World War II, what bases were you at? What were you doing?
I was trying to learn how to fly that doggone airplane, and when they said well, my blood pressure was too high, they put me out and sent me to Madison, Wisconsin to go to electronics school. And I went to electronics school for 7 months.
Is that radar and all?
Yeah. And out of a class of 5,000, I was in the top 5 guys. Because I liked that.
Uh-huh.
And
So when did they tell you, how old were you when they told you had high blood pressure?
18.
Oh, you can't have it. I think they just, for one reason or another, they didn't want to have them.
Oh, you're
Go ahead.
probably right.
I never heard of an 18-year-old having high blood
Well, I
pressure.
had it.
According to them, you had high blood pressure.
Yeah, according to the Air Force, I had it.
Well, what bases were you at?
Most all in the West Coast. I started off at Keesler Field, Mississippi, for basic, and then ended up at Mather Field in Sacramento, California. And we were getting ready to go overseas then. And because they were going to invade Japan, and the colonel said, we're going to lose 1 million people when we hit the beaches. And I'm saying, oh, Jesus, let me get out of this mess. And fortunately, it ended before we got a chance to invade it.
Okay.
But I was, yeah.
You know, the Pentagon building, which is now the headquarters of the U.S. military, was originally planned as a hospital. to receive the expected wounded back from the invasion of Japan.
Really?
And when the war with Japan suddenly ended, they took the Pentagon plans and reshaped them into being the military headquarters.
didn't
I've been
know
told
that.
that.
Wow.
And if you go to the Pentagon, there are all kinds of inclined ways between floors. And that was designed to be able to move hospital patients
Yeah.
by gurney
By gurney.
without having to go to an elevator.
So he and I went through it all.
Yeah.
And what do you remember about my grandfather, Henry McPeak?
He was
Senior.
a sort of a bit of a father figure for me and my boy cousins, because he was so agile and so sprightly and so much involved with everything from bows and arrows and anything to do with hunting or fishing. He was very into, and so we all kind of gravitated, and he led us along to learn how to shoot rifles, a bow and arrow, and
Yeah.
he was very interested. There was a young farmer named Franz Thrasher.
Franz Thrasher.
Yeah, Franz Thrasher. Remember him?
Hell yes.
Well, he was a young farmer, but he was an expert at bird calls. Owls, crows, hawks, he could call them all in by hooting. So Henry would line up with Franz Thrasher and take us in the late afternoon. We'd go crow hunting. Go into a pack of woods where there were some young crows nesting. And Thrasher would make the owl call. It was sort of like, hoo, 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 hoo. He could do it beautifully, had a big chest. And the crows would come in because the owl was the mortal foe of the crows. So there would be crows coming all the time, and we would get wing shooting. We would kill a couple of crows, or 3 or 4. And one time we killed enough crows to have a stack of them, about 40. And then Franz and Henry would take us owl hunting at night.
Yeah.
You find a good, clear, cloudless night, and we would go down near a swamp, but in the woods with an old dead tree. And Franz would call in a great horned owl. These are big birds. They're about that tall, 6-foot wingspan. And he would make the owl call, and the owl would answer and come in closer and closer, and ultimately, hopefully, would land on a tree limb
Yeah.
where we could get a
Shot at.
shot at him.
We shot him at night.
And if you shot an owl, you got a whole box of cartridges
Yeah.
as
a
a
gift.
bounty.
Yeah.
You go down to the local hardware store,
Yeah.
and they give you a box of 25 shotgun shells, worth about, in those days, $5, but now probably 40 or 50.
But I'm surprised you mentioned Franz Thrasher, that you,
Yeah,
because you and I are probably the last 2 people to do him.
well, he was popular with
Big
the,
man, big man.
yeah, he was popular with the young farmers. And
See what flies in the backyard.
Well, I don't know if you've ever seen it. I've done it.
Yeah, Daddy's done it out in the backyard.
And they'll answer, and
yeah, I can do it.
yeah, and eventually they'll come in and close to you. But that was a lot of fun. We had a hell of a lot of fun doing that.
Many years later, I was general counsel of a big steel company, and we had a property in Liberia, which we had to close out because they'd exhausted the iron deposit. And there was a big party for some of the U.S. brass and we were all standing out in Liberia on the mine manager's property, and he during the time that we were out on the platform, I heard a great horned owl call from some swamp nearby. And we'd had a few drinks, and I said, I think I can call him in. They probably thought I was drunk. But I began to imitate Franz. And the owl came in, sat right within within about 100 yards, and everybody was pretty impressed by that.
I would say so.
Yeah.
What about your granddad's personality compared to other people that worked before him?
Well, Henry had a very gregarious, outgoing personality, and he,
Oh, yeah.
wherever he was sort of like the life of the party, or apt to be. He didn't force himself on that.
He loves these boys, Dougie and the rest of them.
Nick, yeah,
Oh, yeah, they were his pals.
Fred and Mac,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Mac ended up as the ambassador to Vietnam or
Oh,
something.
yeah, he was famous.
Yeah.
He was ambassador to the Congo, Belgian Congo.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's the only U.S. ambassador who ever voluntarily resigned and left. And the reason he resigned and left was that he had made a great friend of the local black dictator, Mobutu. Because Mac would arrange for seafood to be shipped in from the Mediterranean for Mobutu. And so Mobutu and Mac were good friends.
Yeah.
And then a couple of people were arrested and were being held for possible execution. They were Europeans. And Mac interceded with Mobutu to spare these people.
Yeah.
And Mobutu wouldn't listen to him, went ahead and executed him. And Mac said to Mobutu, "I'm leaving." So he resigned his ambassadorship, returned to the country.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was kind of interesting, I think.
Ready to break for a little bit?
Sure.
That's
Great job.
interesting. Oh, my
I give these to veterans, first responders, ambassadors, presidents, governors. The first one I gave, I had it made up 2 years ago, I gave to my dad because of his service in World War II. And I couldn't be more honored to give you one of these challenge
Well,
coins.
thank
Yeah.
you very much.
And God bless you.
That's
Thank you for
beautiful.
being here.
Thank you, PD.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really.
Thank
Just,
you.
no, thank you. And hope you're enjoying yourself here.
That's beautiful. You have a pocket right there, the other side. There you go.
Yep.
You got it.
Would anyone like a little cracker or cheese or
Oh.
shrimp
Well,
before
I'll
you
grab
start?
one
Yeah.
before I start talking.
Yeah, thank you, Annie.
Would you like one? Cheese and
Oh,
cracker?
I don't think so.
I'll take one, thank you.
Okay. We have some shrimp too. Henry, if you
So
like.
the schedule is Tom has to go
6?
be home by 6.
No, I have to just be done by 6.
Okay.
That gives me time to get out of here.
And we're going to eat around 6:30.
Okay.
So that's the timing.
Okay.
And the meal's going to be good.
I can see.
Yeah. I'm good. I'm
That
good.
looks
I'm good at grilling. Yeah.
You know, I could use drink a Coke or
Oh, there's
something.
one right there.
There's
There's
a little bit of orange soda right here.
That
We don't
would
have
be-
It's right there, Daddy.
Yeah, that would be fine.
See if you have it. If you, that's kind of a natural orange drink. I don't know whether it's.
Put a little gin in there and straighten it out.
That Canadian gin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a table right there by your hat, Daddy. There you go. Okay, just let me know when you're ready, my friend.
We're rolling.
Okay. So here we are, 2017. Now, you've been here for 95 years,
95.
and Daddy, you've been here for 91 years. There's a lot of turmoil going on in the world and a lot of questions about race. African American, Caucasian, Latino, all the racial issues of the world seem to be bubbling up to the surface right now.
Yep.
What are some of the things in your lives that are poignant memories for you around your interactions with people from different races, but also some of the things that you've seen?
Well, one of the things that I saw that bothered me no end, I was in the Air Force. I got on a train at Biloxi, Mississippi, and walked in, and I had my uniform on. I looked better than Colin Powell ever did. And I went in the dining car and the guy says, "You can't eat in here."
Oh, well.
And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because we don't have the curtain to pull down." And I said, "My mother didn't raise no cannibals. They wouldn't feed me. Now, I'm in the service. Sitting on both sides of me are German prisoners of war who they are feeding. Now, those guys can eat and have a good... I'm on the American side, and I can't even get a sandwich."
Oh, wow.
Now that stuck with me for a long time because I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the German PWs are sitting there talking in German and eating with the guards, and nobody's bothers them, but they sure as hell wouldn't feed me.
So
Oh,
what do you do about that? So if you're there
Nothing.
and you can't get fed and you're wearing the uniform, how do you feel about that? How does
Just
it make
got
you
mad.
You feel bad.
feel?
Yeah.
I had agreed to put my life on the line to protect these people's right to discriminate against me. That don't make sense.
Mr. Francho, what about you? Some of the things that you've seen in your life.
Well, I think the race thing has been very slow in being corrected, but it's about at least 3/4 of the way towards being corrected. And I think just the mixing of our groups here tonight are reflective of that. So I'm optimistic for the ultimate integration in a meaningful way.
When you were in Morris, you had all kinds of people working
Yeah.
for your your grandfather.
Yeah.
Did the issues of race ever come up between people or in any of the relationships?
I
that people
never
worked?
had
No.
any feeling of that at all.
No.
And
This
of
is
course,
true.
in those days, we all had many help in the house.
Yeah.
And when we lived in Oklahoma, we had probably a dozen people working around the place.
Sure.
A cook and a butler and a couple of maids, a laundress, and so we were always, half the time we were, as young white kids, we were dining with black kids, black people. So we never had a problem that way.
Was that unusual at the time?
I think
For
it,
people to be
in
sitting down
retrospect,
breaking bread
yeah,
together?
in retrospect, I think so, because a couple of years before I was born, the worst race riot in American history took place in Tulsa.
Right.
And I was not yet born. My two older siblings were babies. And the family took refuge in the only big building in town. Went up and gathered together with people who were fearful. And the race riot went on. I think there were 400 people killed. The official record I read later was around 50. But my family said there were hundreds of people killed, and it was a terrible situation. But aside from that, race was never a real issue. We highly respected the old black guy named Deacon, who was our butler for many years. He had had a year or two of college. He used to help us with our homework and all of that. And Deacon was a very dignified older black guy we thought highly of. And his wife, Catherine, was the cook. And these people, with the governesses and so forth, kind of looked after us kids.
Yep.
So we were always very easy as a practical matter.
Sure.
But I don't think the society, I think my family were probably different from the general society. There was apparently a lot of, I think the race riot in Tulsa was started because of jealousy between the white lower class rednecks and the black population, because the black population were doing much better. They had their own pharmacy, their own service entities, stores, and they were doing just great. And the white lower class rednecks, as I would call them, were very envious and jealous. And that's what caused the tension. And when it was kicked off by an incident, turned into this murderous riot.
You know, the question I was trying to get to was the grandfather setting up the money for your family to go to school.
So what did Papa do when he would take Mr. Franshaw's kids to college and get them set up? What did he do?
Took them, checked them in the dormitory, opened a checking account. He did everything.
Yeah, he was a great
Yeah.
guy at that.
Oh, yeah.
He never did that for me because I was too young. But
But who was his predecessor, Dad?
Pardon?
Not, his predecessor was not so nice.
oh, George Kick was a driver,
Yeah.
a white guy who was a driver, I think, a chauffeur for my grandfather before Henry McPeak.
Oh, okay.
And George Kick was kind of an unattractive, surly guy. And he didn't have time for the kids. So Granddad fired him and hired Henry.
Okay.
That changed everything.
Now, my dad got the job as chauffeur, couldn't drive.
Yeah.
And the reason he got the job is he had heard that the guy he's talking about, he got fired. So my dad goes to Mr. Fanshawe and applies for the job. They never asked him if he could drive. And so my dad's brother, Jerry, taught him how to drive so he could be the chauffeur.
Isn't that great?
But my recollection that George Kick was kind of, he didn't like to have the kids around.
No.
That's. I think that was true.
But can you
I don't know
talk a
whether
little bit
George
about
Kick
the-
was
the
his name.
relationship between the two men?
What?
They seem to be friends. If
The
you-
relationship between your grandfather and,
Yeah.
and mine. What their relationship was.
They worked together.
Oh, they worked together. Henry McPeak, his granddad's chauffeur, was a very trusted person for my grandfather. Whatever he needed, he would turn to Henry.
Yeah.
Henry would take care of it.
My
Where
dad,
where did he drive him?
they got my dad a deferment from World War I by teaching him how to do bookkeeping.
Uh-huh.
And he got a deferment.
Oh,
And so he was the paper shuffler for all of the oil well property
oh
around
no.
Olean.
I never heard that.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, when I was playing good golf, I played at all kind of closed country clubs where, not because they wanted me, it was because I could beat the hell out of most of them.
Yeah, at golf.
Yeah, that's right.
What was your handicap?
3.
Oh, wow.
Boy,
Where
that
did you learn to play golf?
When I was,
Where?
probably started caddying.
yeah, when I started caddying, and his uncle, Pascal, used to give me 10 cents a bag a hole to caddy for him at Gilbertsville where they had a little golf course.
Talk a little, if you could, about your career after college.
Well, I went to work after college for General Electric. Now I have no idea how they ever got a hold of me. When I was a freshman at Syracuse in '49, there was 150 guys in the class. There were 2 African Americans. 2. And whoever was president then come out with an edict that said, we won't give you any more GI contracts unless you hire some minority engineers.
Yeah, right.
Right away, I'm being hunted. The telephone is ringing and people saying, are you looking for a job?
Good. Good policy.
Well,
So after GE, what did you do?
after I went to work at General Electric, I worked there for a number of years, and Cornell had a lab right across the street. And I was playing golf with some of these guys, and the guy said, "Why don't you come to work for us?" And I said, "'Cause you don't pay any salary." He says, "We will match any salary that you can get in the industry."
Yeah.
I went to work for Cornell.
You got free tuition. Wow.
Got free
And when I first went there, I was in the physics department working with a lot of the German and American scientists that had worked on the A-bomb.
Oh.
And I knew a lot of them. I was hired to work with graduate students and professors solving electronic problems, building equipment. So that was my job. One day the telephone rings, and a guy named Bill Gurewitz, who was vice president of Cornell, called me. He said, "Hey, do you want to come over and talk to me?" Now, one thing I learned, somebody says that, go. And I go to his office, and he said, "The man that runs the dormitories just died. I got to get somebody to run these dormitories." He says, "I know that you're going to school." I was, extramural in a hotel administration. He says, "This would be up your alley." I went to work for Mr. Gurewitz, running 5,000 bed dormitory.
Boy.
My goodness.
People say, "What do you do?" I say, "I run the biggest hotel in New York State." And I did.
Yeah.
And so I did that until my blood pressure got to kicking up and they made me retire.
Yeah,
about
but
you,
I don't think your blood pressure actually kicked up, did it?
Yeah, it did at that point.
Oh, it did
20
after?
years after the first time they did
Oh,
it.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
What about your career after the military? What did you do?
Well, I was interrupted at Yale, halfway through Yale. And so I went into the service for about 30 months. And when I came out, I finished my undergraduate at Yale in one calendar year. Got my degree, BA. And I had to give the postman $11 to get my BA. It came in a cardboard container. And then I went to Yale Law School because I was married and had 2 little kids, Peter and his older brother. And I graduated from the Yale Law School in 1949. And then I went to Providence, Rhode Island, and worked for a very good law firm there. And 3 years or 4 years as an associate, and then became a partner for 9 years. And after 14 years in Providence, I got a little restless and decided I would take a look at the corporate practice. And Ford Motor Company was recruiting people for their legal staff. So I was one of 6 people picked ostensibly to be ultimately competing for the general counselship of Ford. And I moved my family to Grosse Pointe near Detroit and moved out and served about 3.5 years with Ford. I was a general counsel for their tractor division, which gave me quite a bit of international experience and travel.
Yeah.
And then the other people who had been recruited to compete for the general counselship at Ford learned that they had previously picked a guy, very good man, named Hank Nolte, and they had put him as general counsel for Ford of Britain. So, but when we learned that we'd been seduced into the job for false pretenses because they knew who they wanted as the job, then I took off and spent 10 years with Bristol Myers Company in New York in the I was associate general counsel, and I was in charge of all their consumer related, not their medical stuff, but their things like Drano, Windex, Behold furniture polish, all of that was in my
Okay.
responsibility.
Well, I would have been a lawyer had it not been for World War II.
Yeah,
I wanted to be a lawyer. I had learned from Pascal
yeah,
what it is lawyers do, and I said, "Gee, man, that sounds like a good hustle."
yeah.
But along comes World War II.
Kind of messed up
In
your
3.5 years, I gave up. I said, "No, I'm not going to
Yeah,
go
yeah,
any more school."
yeah.
Well, you've both been here more than 90 years. So if you had to share some life lessons with your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, what are some of your big life lessons that you would like to share?
Well, I
that
would
you
think
think are important?
you shouldn't get married too young.
Absolutely.
You should wait for men. An ideal time to get married would be 28 to 30. For women, maybe a couple of years younger, 20 because of their procreation. 24, 26 would be an ideal time.
Okay. Why do you think those are good numbers? What makes those good numbers?
Well, it's just my own impression that people who wait a little while before marriage
Yeah.
tend to have better success
Okay.
in marriage.
They're more mature.
Right?
They're older. They're more mature.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
What
And-
else, other than don't get married too young? What other advice would you pass on?
Well, to not fight nature, but to go with the flow
Okay.
and accept aging as a natural process, which I'm still trying to do at the age of 95. But if you fight Mother Nature, she's a pretty tough old broad.
That's right.
And so I say, I gave up drinking hard liquor about 25 years ago. I used to drink, typical of a French show, I drank quite a bit. But giving it up was not hard. I was not addicted. And I think it's added at least 20 years to my life. If I had continued drinking into my retirement years, I would have been long
I
gone.
don't think you'd be here.
Yeah, yeah. So I would advise both men and women to move away from drinking hard liquor at about the age of 35 or 40.
Okay.
And unless you're addicted, it's relatively easy to do. And I think it makes a big difference.
So don't get married too young.
Yeah,
Don't get stuck in alcohol.
right.
What else? What other life lessons? And you said
Um,
don't fight Mother Nature, right?
Don't fight Mother Nature, but
Okay.
try to open yourself to people and get involved. And it doesn't matter what you're doing, the fact that you're doing something is important. And I think you have to take what life serves up to you as opportunities. And if you're open and relaxed and not focused on one thing or this or that, you tend to find something that's congenial and you grow with it. And you have, I think, a better life experience.
Okay.
I think
What do you think, Daddy?
one of the big things that I see in young people is to get education at a higher level than high school. In other words, get 4 years of college.
Yeah.
Because today technology is such that you got to be a real expert. Now, I was a good engineer, believe me. I couldn't go into a lab today and contribute a damn thing.
So get an
Everything,
education.
yes.
What other wisdom would you like to pass
And I
on?
like the idea of waiting until they get older to get married and have children.
Okay.
Get to know your partner.
Before you get married.
Yep.
What else?
I
If
couldn't.
John Michael was here today and you had to give him a piece of advice,
I
what
would.
would you tell him?
He's my grandson. I would tell him to do just what he's doing. He gets all A's in high school except math, which he's got a B, and we're going to work on that. but to stay in that groove so that when it comes time to go to higher education, you're prepared.
Anything else you two would like to share, or any other wisdom today that you can impart on me?
Well, I think we were very lucky in the span of years that were given to us.
Yep.
During much of our youth, the World War II was the background,
Yep.
and we never had to worry about what we were going to do. We had to do it, and so we never had the nervous insecurity of not knowing what the future was.
Yeah.
The future was right on us, and when we got through World War II, the rebuilding of Europe under the American leadership and everything else, everybody knew that they had work to do, and what it was, the opportunities were unlimited. So we had a wonderful, the span of years that we have shared. You couldn't beat it in terms of good feeling about the country and yourself.
Okay.
And the race thing was always a big drag, but with Martin Luther King, and that whole thing began to turn and become less and less and less a problem. And I think that there's still problems, but they're very they're not what I would call significant. I
Okay.
think if we just continue what we're doing,
Stay on the same
the
path.
whole race thing will be
What do you think about Trump, Daddy?
I can't use those kind of bad words.
A couple of thoughts about the Donald. Without swearing.
Well, unfortunately, he don't know what the hell he's doing.
What makes you say that?
Well, he wants to get. He'd love to start a war with North Carolina,
North Korea.
North Korea. I've been through war. That's no kick. That's no fun. But just before you say things, think about them, and don't run off half-cocked.
Okay. Mr. Franshaw, any thoughts about
I
our
think
current
Trump
president?
is a psychopath, technically.
Yeah.
I read David David Brooks's editorial in October of 2016, where he took the textbook definition of a psychopath. There were 8 or 9 indicia. Trump fitted all except one. And so I say with some degree of confidence that the man is a psychopath with a strong narcissistic approach where he has to be always at the center. And I don't think he's a Republican or a Democrat. I think he's a person who wants popular support psychopathically. And when he found, to his surprise, that there were large elements in both the Democrat and the Republican parties who were very dissatisfied with the lockup in Washington, he realized that he had looked into, like a surfer looking into a wave, and he began to ride that. And any time the wave got a little bit low, he would throw in some outrageous statement to bring the wave back up, so he can ride. So he's publicly, he's a narcissist, a psychopath, and I think in the large sense very dangerous. But I think his family are much better than he is. I rather like his daughter and his sons by various wives. I think they're kind of normal people.
Anything you disagree with there, Daddy?
This day is dangerous to agree with.
On the other side, since we're all here, because of your grandfathers and their relationship, can you just talk about the two of them for a minute? What they, like, just a little humanism about the two men, because they must have been friends.
Talk about Papa for a while. What do you remember most about Papa?
Well,
About what?
I'm
my
asking
dad.
my father what he remembers about Hank McPeak.
my father was, he took kids like this, taught them how to shoot shotgun,
Yeah.
make things and so forth. He didn't stand back and wait for somebody to do something.
He was very full of nervous,
Yeah.
effective energy. It was always, he was not somebody to lie back.
No,
He was always up and around.
And what do you remember most about your grandfather?
My grandfather?
Yeah, what do you remember most about him?
them cigars he smoked.
Yeah.
Other than the cigars?
And bourbon.
Bourbon?
Mm-hmm.
I once, when I was young, I tried to figure out how much bourbon my grandfather had drunk in his lifetime, and I gave up. But it got into something like 1,500 barrels. But that was just taking his customary cigars, but I don't ever remember him being drunk in the sense of obnoxious. He was just he was a guy who enjoyed having half a dozen drinks a night.
Well, how do you think these two men, your grandfather and mine, became friends?
Well, I think it was that they were mutually supportive of each other, could help each other.
Yeah, that's right.
And my granddad increasingly depended upon
My grand.
on Henry.
And they
Is-
both liked to hunt and fish, right? They both liked hunting and fishing. They were both sporting men, right?
Well, yeah,
He'd get in
your
there.
progenitor was a great guy for anything to do with hunting,
Yeah.
fishing. I never did much fishing with him, but he was very alert to what was going on in nature, and that's how the crow hunting and the owl hunting, and the woodchuck shooting were all part of
Yeah.
which he brought to us as young boys,
Right.
and it was a very nice relationship.
So they enjoyed the outdoors and.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he was good at it.
Okay.
He could, when he took us woodchuck hunting, we would get into a station wagon with 2 or 3 rifles, maybe a 25 caliber or a 30 caliber rifle,
22.
and 22s. And Henry would drive down these little dirt roads, and he would say, "Now, there's going to be a woodchuck around the corner, I think," because I could see his mound. And he said, "When I get up there, I'll shut the engine off, and I'll call the truck to sit up, and you can get a shot." So he would make a call with his fingers, and the woodchuck, hearing that call, would stand up,
Wow.
and about this high, with a white chest, looking around for that call. Henry would whistle again, and the truck would look, and we would get a shot. Oftentimes we would. Once in a while we would kill one. But the woodchucks were a pest because of their
Right.
holes. Yeah.
Marshall
Nah,
Pierce
I-
had what his role was in the pageant in 1940.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
The pageant of 1940?
Yeah.
Remember you were handing out programs for that?
Yeah.
What was your role in the pageant?
I played the part of an American Indian.
Fabulous.
I had an Indian suit. And they put something to make my face kind of dark,
Yeah.
and I had a few lines to give and so forth.
Yeah.
But I had an Indian suit on and Indian headdress. And I looked down and I was wearing patent leather shoes.
Did everybody have different parts in the pageant?
Oh, yeah,
Did you like
yeah.
to play or?
Sure.
Oh, it was a whole script about the original people coming in. And they had an ox-drawn cart with 2 live oxen, which came onto the stage. And the stage had to be reinforced to support the weight of these 2 oxes. But at part of the show, at some point, illustrating when the Francho family immigrated, the ox cart moved across the stage, and I was hoping that the stage wouldn't collapse. But we had about 2,500 local people as the audience
Really?
under a big tent
Wow.
next to the house at Morris.
Do you know who wrote the script and who wrote the story? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think my uncle Pascal did most of that. And of course, he was hopeful that Francho Tone, who was a big actor in Hollywood, would be able to be the lead role.
Oh, okay.
And at the last minute, that became impossible because Francho Tone had some thing he had to do which prevented him doing it. So they brought in one of our middle-aged relatives to substitute for Francho Tone, which he did sort of, but it took a lot of the steam out of the show.
Sure. Do you remember anything else about the pageant?
I'm getting sleepy.
There were about several hundred people, though, it's 2,500 in the audience.
There's my dad's picture.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Whoops.
yeah.
All right. Well, anything before you take a nap, Daddy? Anything you gentlemen want to say to wrap up?
No, I just thank you for your interest, and I'm totally surprised and delighted to meet your dad.
My dad. Yep.
Yes, and the last time I remember him, he was, maybe this tall,
A little while ago, huh?
a little while ago.
A couple of days ago.
All right. All right. I think we're done.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Tom.
We call it Franchot Park, Franchot Field. And every one of them said it was like a utopia. Because it was just such a, people could, white and black, in other words, people would leave their children there and go out shopping or whatever. And they didn't need a babysitter. They would send them down to Franchot Field, and they knew that everything was safe.
Kind of safe there.
Yeah, everything was safe and nobody bothered anybody. So that was my idea of what the Franchot was to me as a child growing up, in terms of who your great grandfather was. I didn't know that until much later on. The mayor, and then when I met Marcia and her father, I never knew these stories about their relationships in terms of the family and all of these people going to school. Yeah. So when I heard about this event, I became very excited, about just witnessing. I didn't come here to play music, you understand? But this is what I do. This is my first language.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to play.
I remember a line from a tune back then. Oh, Mr. Moon, moon, bright and shiny moon, won't you shine down on me?
That's going back to the 30s or 20s. And I know thousands and thousands of tunes, but you just stumped the band on that one right there. I learned my mother played piano, so I learned the American songbook in the womb, I started working when I was about 13. But I already knew most of the songs. But I'm just going to give me a letter name from A to G.
Well,
A letter.
B.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
G.
G. Give me another one, bud. Give me a letter.
Letter of the alphabet.
A. Okay. Give me another one, Marsh.
B.
Give me one. C. Oh well, that's okay. It's basically just the scale, but we'll take that as a.
How about F?
So that's all. That's in other words, that's in the moment, like this event was today. And so I just wanted to add my 2 cents because it was most of history, a great percentage of history, very small, doesn't get recorded. And a very much of that gets distorted. But this is like I heard some history today that maybe nobody will hear, but it was so important and so moving. And thank Bud.
Yeah.
And thank you, Frederick.
Yeah. Bud is my new hero. He's
Yeah.
my new icon.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Okay,
get.
that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dad